Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, back with another LCS content video. I know I do these so unbelievably infrequently, but I think that's something I'm going to work on this year. I'm going to start making a lot more LCS content. I've been a lot more, devoted to seeing what's going on in the LCS world, and it's something that I think I would like to make more content on. So this is kind of the start of that. This is going to be a video for those of you who may not be as up to date with all of the roster rumors and the roster changes that have been announced as of today, which is, of course, November 12th, 2020. I want to make sure that I point out the date here today because this could all change as of a few days. Free agency doesn't even officially open, of course, until November 16th, 4 days from now. So none of these changes or contracts have even been signed yet. This is all just speculation, verbal agreements, contract negotiations, stuff like that. I just want to get some people up to date. I've had a lot of conversations about what my thoughts are on some of the roster changes, as well as a lot of people who may not be as familiar with it. So I figured I'd tackle that all in one video here. I'm not going to give super in-depth analysis on this one. I'm going to save that for when I end up doing my preseason predictions. A lot of this is just going to be my thoughts on player acquisitions and not so much on the fit. Although maybe I will touch on that a little bit with some teams. This is mostly going to be just my review of the offseason moves, maybe reviewing the contract structure, whether I think it was a good or a bad deal made by the organization, things such as that in nature. So if you guys are excited for more LCS content like that, please go ahead, like, subscribe. I'm going to be making more this upcoming year. And so if that's something you're interested in, feel free to stick around if you're enjoying it. So the first team I want to go ahead and tackle is going to be TSM. I'm going to do this in reverse order from how these teams finished in the summer split. So I'm going to go first to 10th. TSM, of course, being our summer split champions. They are a very, very interesting case. So how this is going to be formatted, as you can see on the screen. Right now, I have the 2020 roster for TSM, the summer split roster. As well as the 2021 projected rumored roster. That is something that I cannot stress enough in this video is, of course, it's 4 days before free agency has even started. There are no contracts that have been signed. Everything that we have to go on is just rumor and speculation. But I do have quite a bit of info on these rumors and speculations. So I'd like to believe that, a lot of what I'll talk about here, I will either preface with, I feel comfortable with, I don't feel comfortable with, or it's somewhere in the middle. I guess I'll just go with the for sure people that are staying. It looks like Spica and Double Lift, so the jungle and the AD carry, are going to be sticking around. I believe that's fine. Spica is definitely someone I would like to build around. Spica had a really good Worlds. TSM, of course, going 0-6, super underperformed, but I actually thought he was the pretty lone bright spot on that Worlds run. And he just consistently improved throughout the entirety of the summer split. I think it's good to build around him. Double Lift, there was actually quite a bit of question as to whether or not he was going to be the starting TSM bot laner. Now, there technically is still a chance that Double Lift is not your AD carry for TSM, that they end up going with Lost, who is their Academy AD carry, who I personally believe is slightly better than Double Lift, but that's neither here nor there. There is a chance that they do indeed promote Lost, and Double Lift does. I doubt he would find another team at this point in time. A lot of the top teams, I doubt he would play for someone who wasn't a top team. I would expect him to go into streaming if he isn't starting for TSM. But for the purpose of this video, we're just going to assume that both Spica and Double Lift are both on the roster. Now, that brings us to the 3 changes here, which are incredibly interesting. The first one I want to talk about is the most confirmed one, which is in the mid lane, and that's going to be Power of Evil, replacing Bjergsen, who did go ahead and retire, and of course has taken over the head coach position for TSM in the upcoming 2021 season. Now, Power of Evil is about as fantastic of a replacement as this team could have asked for. There was a lot of controversy surrounding this position in the offseason. Some leaked DMs, of course, from some assistant coaches in the league saying that TSM had kind of burned a lot of bridges with players. That seems to not be true, as they seem to actually be in a very good position to sign quite a few talented players, Power of Evil being maybe the best of them. He had an absolutely fantastic split, maybe the best split of his career, especially the best year of his career last year with FlyQuest in 2020. I would see this as about as close to a side grade as you could possibly get from Bjergsen. The rumor, of course, at the start was that they were going to pick up a young EU Masters mid, someone like a Zico or someone like a Lighter was originally supposed to be kind of the thought process, but I actually like this decision a lot more to go with the more proven player here. I think you have a pretty decent academy mid laner in Evolved that isn't quite ready for LCS, but could be ready given some time, so it doesn't feel too important to me to go and reach out and pay a ton of money for maybe a younger player when you already have one on roster that's probably going to cost a lot less. That being said, Power of Evil fits in really well here. I think he's an excellent player. I think it works out really well. The other two additions that I have on here, the one I'm a little more confident in is Licorice in the top lane. We'll get to Cloud9 and why Licorice is available for Cloud9 in a little bit, but Licorice has become available due to events surrounding this offseason, due to some promotions, some coaching changes. Licorice has become available. This actually could be one of two players. This could be either Licorice or this could be Impact, who has become a free agent from Team Liquid. I think Licorice is slightly more likely. It seems that TSM is going a little bit harder in on Licorice. I remember Impact was originally more desired by the team just because he is going to be cheaper, Impact being a free agent, Licorice being a buyout, but the price on Licorice has dropped drastically just because I think a lot of teams in the league are struggling with money right now, a lot of them being owned by NBA teams struggling a little bit with money, not having that income from the playoffs, but essentially it's put Licorice back in the price range for TSM. I think it would be an excellent grab for them to go and get him as maybe the best endemic top laner in the region. The support, it's rumored to be 100% some non-resident player. I have Ignar here. I think Ignar, the rumors are that FlyQuest is blowing up, and we'll get to FlyQuest actually in just a second, but if FlyQuest is blowing up and if a lot of their members are leaving the roster, I see this as a prime destination for someone like Ignar. I know playing with Power of Evil was one of the big reasons that brought him to FlyQuest in the first place and to NA, and so I can see that being a very similar case for TSM here. My only concern here, and I don't want to talk about the fit too much, would just be the synergy between players like Doublelift and Ignar. I think they approach the game in two very different ways, and I'm not quite sure how that would fit, but I actually see this roster as a pretty significant upgrade to the 2021 that one summer. So I actually see this team as definitely a Worlds contender. You know, so one of the teams that I would expect to be pushing for a summer championship. But moving on to the second team, the team that got second in the summer split was FlyQuest. Now, this is the first of two teams that I'm going to make the big preface with of we quite literally have no idea what this team and then Golden Guardians, which we'll talk about later, we have absolutely no idea what they're doing. There's a potential that all 5 players are gone. There's a potential that a couple players stay. There's a potential that, you know, a lot of the players stay. We just have so little info on FlyQuest and Golden Guardians. And like I said before, I was talking about the NBA team ownerships. A lot of these teams are really struggling for money right now. And so if they do have players that they deem to be really good and worth something, they're likely getting sold in this offseason to teams that aren't as financially constrained as them. So the FlyQuest team is up on the screen right now. I have pretty much no confidence this is what the FlyQuest team is going to look like. This is honestly just an excuse to talk about some players that I think are interesting free agents. I'm not sure if they'll get teams, but we'll go ahead and talk about them. The two members on FlyQuest, I will say that I think are staying, are Solo in the top lane and the Wild Turtle in the bot lane. Both members are currently under contract, and I haven't really heard too much interest from other teams. Not too surprising, Solo really underperformed at Worlds. He had a very bad World Championship. And Wild Turtle just doesn't seem like the type that a team would be actively looking to reach out to. A lot of the top teams have really good bot laners already, or are looking for younger options on other teams. So Solo and Wild Turtle especially are looking to be still on this FlyQuest roster. However, the other positions are pretty much up for grabs. I have a lot of the veterans that I want to talk about here. So we'll start with Xmithie. Xmithie was released by Immortals, which means he is a free agent. It is not a buyout situation. It's not something where they just are looking to sell him because they have found an upgrade. They actively cut his contract. So he is a free agent to go ahead and sign. Of course, he is the oldest player in LCS. I can see that being a detriment to his free agency case. He's coming off of a not too stellar year with Immortals, but you really have to ask yourself how much of that is the team and how much of that is the player. So the other players I like to talk about here are Golden Glue. I have Golden Glue here. I actually think Golden Glue is a little bit underrated going into this offseason. I thought he had a pretty decent second half of the summer split on Evil Geniuses when they did give him that starting spot. However, I don't see much interest in him, and honestly, I'd be surprised if he did find a consistent starting job in the LCS. Other players I want to point out here are players like Yusui, or pretty much any other endemic, Blaze Olive is another endemic academy talent in the mid lane. A lot of the academy talent in mid lane is really, really solid. It's really hard to break into that position in the LCS right now with a lot of that position looking to be imported. So those are also worth noting in the mid lane. And then I have Biofrost here as the support. Again, this just seems like a culture fit. Biofrost and Wild Turtle have obviously played together before on TSM for the one split that Doublelift took off. I think this would make sense. Biofrost doesn't really seem to have a market, but I think he's too good of a player to not have a starting spot on an LCS team. This is a guy who was coming off of a 2019 where I was calling him potentially one of the 10 best players in the entire league. And his 2020 was, pretty abysmal. It was definitely the worst season of his career, and it lowered his stock quite significantly, but I still see him as a player that is probably worth taking a flyer on. And especially for FlyQuest, if you really want to maintain that, public perception of like the goodwill, the good-natured team. Players like Smithy, Golden Glue, and Biofrost are very positive influences in the community and have pretty dedicated fan bases to themselves. And I could see that being a big reason why you would want to keep them on board. But we can go ahead and move on to the next team, which is Team Liquid. Now, this one is really easy to talk about because this one is, I don't want to say all but set in stone, but it is actually, it's going to be very shocking if this is not their starting five coming into 2021, which is going to be Alphari in the top lane, Santorin in the jungle, Jensen mid lane, Tactical bot lane, and Core JJ support. Mid, bot, and support are obviously staying. Jensen just signed that absolutely monstrous contract for 3 years to stay with Team Liquid. It's worth about 1.4, 1.5 million per year. It's the biggest contract that we have seen in the West. I don't know if that's going to be topped. Well, it almost certainly will be topped by a team that I'll get to in a minute, but we'll see what Power of Evil gets paid and everything like that. But as of now, it is the biggest contract in the history of LCS, and I honestly completely agree with it. I think Jensen's one of those players you have to lock down, especially with Bjergsen's retirement. You could absolutely make the argument that he's now the best player in LCS. He's almost certainly the best mid laner. Power of Evil would really be the only one that would argue that, and maybe some imports, but we'll get to that. And so I think this is an absolutely genius move by them. I think you have to lock him down. Keeping Tactical and Core JJ is obviously a no-brainer. Tactical was Rookie of the Year, and it was very well-deserved. He was he consistently improved, and he actually showed off really well at Worlds. Core JJ is another player that you could argue is just the best player in the entire LCS, is one of the best supports in the world, the reigning MVP. So those were all no-brainers to keep. The two changes come in the top and the jungle. We'll talk about the top lane first because that one is reportedly confirmed by Jacob Wolf, and that is Alphari coming over from Origin in the LEC to replace Impact, who was a free agent. Now, I think this is such a massive upgrade. I like Impact as a player. I am an Impact fan, but what Alphari brings to the table is so much more than what Impact brings to the table. Alphari is the type of player that you can play through every single game, that has a variety of picks, but is also still a good tank player. He can still play weak side. He's not going to give over needless deaths. He's kind of just an upgraded version of what we saw from Impact. Basically Impact, but with the ability to carry. There's a real argument to be made that he was the best top laner in Europe this past split, even over players like Wonder and Bwipo. And if you're making that argument, then you're making the argument that Alphari is a top 5 top laner in the entire world. And that's something I'd absolutely listen to. I do think he is that good. And I think bringing him in is absolutely massive. Santorin is the rumor here in the jungle. This one's a little bit less certain, but it's still pretty likely. TL is reportedly very actively pursuing Santorin. And I can definitely see why. He was the best jungler in the LCS last split. You have Alphari and Core JJ as your 2 imports, so you would need some endemic player to slot into that jungle position. And Santorin is without a doubt the best of that bunch. He was a free agent this offseason, so it wouldn't have cost them a buyout to go ahead and get him on the team. And again, I think this is another no-brainer if you can get it. Santorin is the type of jungler that is absolutely happy to play for his lanes, to sacrifice what he needs to in the jungle to get everybody else ahead. And when you have players like Alphari and Jensen, I think that's just such a massive advantage. And I can't really see this team not being competitive. If this is the roster, and I know I won't talk about my analysis too much, but if this is the roster going into 2021, top 8 at Worlds has to be the absolute bare minimum of expectations for this team. Then we move on to probably the most interesting team this entire offseason, which is Cloud9. Now, what you're seeing on your screen is not a joke. the rumored roster is Fudge, Blabber, Sven Vulcan in the bot lane, and a mid laner of Perkz, which would be Jacob Wolf. Actually, I'm really glad I waited till tonight on the 12th to record this video, because Jacob Wolf about an hour ago actually reported that it is pretty much certain that it is going through. Perkz is going to be the mid laner for Cloud9 on the largest buyout and the largest salary in the history of League of Legends. And, you know, I really, it's hard to analyze that, because it's such a shock move where you are taking arguably the best player that Europe has ever seen. You know, you can throw Caps and whatever into that argument, but definitely one of them, Reckless as well, of course. But you're taking him away from a team that just finished top 4 at Worlds, and he's going back to play his natural position of mid lane for Cloud9 of all teams. The rumored buyout is just south of like $5 million, about $4.4 million just for the buyout, not even including the salary. We're probably looking closer to something like $2 million a year. Just an unreal amount of money that they're probably dishing out for Perkz here. But you have to imagine that it's worth it if they can go ahead and really make some noise on the international stage, which this team pretty much has to at this point. Blabber, Sven, and Vulcan are, of course, coming over from the 2020 team. The only other change is in the top lane. Licorice is out, and Fudge is actually being promoted from the academy team to the main roster. This is, of course, one of the big changes of the offseason was the OS region actually shutting down, unfortunately for them. You know, rest in peace, OPL. But meaning that any OS player that comes to NA is actually going to be considered not an import. They are considered just as endemic as any NA player is. So Fudge being an academy now has a very clear path to the main roster. They clearly see him as an upgrade to Licorice. Fudge dominated academy last year. It's hard for me to say that he's an upgrade to Licorice just because Licorice has been so consistently good for quite a while. But if there's any organization that I trust in seeing young talent and knowing when to promote them and when they're ready, Cloud9 is 100% that organization in North America. So if they see Fudge as someone who is immediately an upgrade to Licorice, then I'd have to agree with them. He is an incredibly good carry player. He's a good tank player. I think he fits really well with this roster. I think, like I said with Team Liquid, the expectation for this roster has to be quarterfinals at minimum at Worlds. Like, you have to get out of groups with this roster. It's just too good, especially if you're going to spend something like $7 to $8 million to bring one player in. That is almost triple the budget. That is 8 times what Golden Guardians spent on their team this year, and they got 5th place. So if you're spending all that on one player, you have to have international success. So that's going to have to be the expectation for this team. Moving on to the other team that, and this one, I'm not even going to preface it. This is Golden Guardians, quote unquote. I put 5 players that I just want to talk about here. I have heard nothing about what they're actually reportedly interested in. These are just some thoughts, some players that I think could be interesting to talk about. Of course, Golden Guardians is reportedly selling their entire roster, which, if their money troubles are to be believed, I can't necessarily blame them. But we'll get into where a lot of those pieces are going in a little bit. Let's just talk about some players that I would like to talk about that I think are interesting cases of, I don't know if they're going to get LCS spots, but they're people that I think should at least be in the conversation. Huni in the top lane is definitely someone I want to talk about. We haven't gotten to Evil Geniuses yet, but it looks like they're going to be upgrading in the top lane. We could potentially be seeing Huni role swap. I've been hearing rumors of that for months now. Obviously, that was a big rumor last year as well, that he really wanted to play mid lane. I don't know how likely that is. I think mid lane is an incredibly difficult position to break into in the league right now, and so I'm not even sure there'd really be a situation where that would even be possible. But it is worth noting that he is likely going to be available this offseason, and I just think he's too good to sit somewhere in the academy. I think I would be giving Huni a roster spot. He didn't have the best of 2020s, but this is a guy that has proven before in many years that he is a top-level player in the world. And I'd have to say, I'd be shocked if he doesn't at least get that opportunity. The jungler I want to talk about is Contracts. Contracts is reportedly being replaced by 100 Thieves, which we'll get to in a little bit again. But Contracts actually had a really good bounce-back split after a few middling years on this Golden Guardians team. He had a really good bounce-back split on 100 Thieves. He showed really good synergy with Someday in the top lane. Actually pushed them into playoffs as Meteos' replacement. And looked overall just looked pretty good. I don't think he is some groundbreaking jungler. I think he's somewhere in the middle to lower end of the starting caliber junglers in North America. But I would be surprised if he didn't get a roster spot considering what he did last year. The mid laner I want to talk about is actually a player named Zico. Zico, for those of you who might not be familiar, is the mid laner for the Movistar Riders in the EU Masters scene. He has actually been tremendous. I actually think he's been really good in EU Masters. He's really impressed me, and there's been a lot of rumors that he's really been interested in coming over to North America this offseason. I know the EU Masters scene has essentially been completely torn up by the LEC and LCS teams this season, but Zico is one of the people that I think would really fit in on a North American team. He is notoriously a very big TSM fan. Originally, this was the player that I had pegged to be Bjergsen's replacement as kind of that come in, we're gonna have this mid laner, the superstar mid laner, teach you how to be great, right? But even without TSM, the rumor is still that he is coming to NA. I can see this Golden Guardians actually being a pretty good spot for him to land as a place that has notoriously been pretty good at developing talent. But I'd definitely be interested to see if he could come over. The bot lane I want to talk about here is actually King and Diamond. Now, I'm not even sure these two are available for purchase. Of course, this is Cloud9 Academy's bot lane. However, you got to pay for Perkz somewhere. And I guarantee you that they could get a lot of money for these two combined. Probably somewhere closer to $1.5 to $2 million on buyouts for these two. King is probably worth closer to $1 million just on buyout by himself. But I could definitely see it being possible for these two to be starting in the LCS. Of course, King is definitely good enough. Like I said with King and Lost earlier as well for TSM, these two are just tremendous talents that absolutely would be starting in the LCS on most teams. However, they are unfortunately stuck behind some of the best players in their role in the region. So they're just developing right now, but I could definitely see some team coming in with a pretty large offer to try and swing King and Diamond over to their side. The sixth team I want to talk about is Evil Geniuses. Evil Geniuses is incredibly interesting. They've actually been linked to quite a few players. Perkz was, of course, the first big link here this year so far, and that's true. That's proven not to be true because he went to Cloud9 instead, but I still think they're going to be coming out swinging. The members of the roster that are looking like they're going to be staying are Svenskeren in the jungle and then Zeyzal as the support. Svenskeren is reportedly the centerpiece of this EG team. They really want to look to build around him. He is, of course, coming off of, he was an MVP in 2019 summer. He's coming off of that really fantastic split. He had a decent year at EG in 2020. However, I don't think it was quite up to the expectations of what the org was looking for from him. He didn't seem to have a ton of synergy with Jizuke, which is why I see that as a position that's likely going to be changed in the upcoming year. But Zeyzal looking to stick around as well. There just isn't a ton of support talent that is not super expensive in North America right now. And Zeyzal is definitely competent enough to fill that role. The one I'm most confident in, at least happening for EG here, is the bottom laner Johnson. Johnson, of course, the starting bot laner for Dignitas this past year. He played really well. He was a really good rookie. He would have run rookie of the split if not for Tactical, which is totally fair. Tactical was fantastic, but Johnson was also really good. He was the bright spot for a Dig team that really struggled to create bright spots in a lot of their games. So obviously he is a solo queue star. He joined Dignitas in 2020 as kind of that solo queue prodigy. He had 4 accounts in the top 10 of solo queue and etc. But mechanically he's fantastic. I think he's only going to get better. I can see why EG is incredibly interested in him. The other two I want to talk about, I guess, are the solo laners. In the top lane, it's looking like it's going to be the inverse of that Licorice Impact scene, which everyone TSM doesn't end up going for is going to probably end up here on EG. I have TSM going for Licorice, and so I have Impact ending up here on EG. I could definitely see it being possible that it goes the other way around, though. I could see Impact ending up on TSM and Licorice ending up here on EG as well. But I'm going to talk about Impact. Impact's a good player. He's kind of a known quantity at this point, right? He is a really, really stable player. He's never really going to lose lane. He can do a decent job at carrying and adding to your team, but he's mostly going to be that weak side tank player or Vladimir or whatever, etc. That you can kind of leave on an island and focus elsewhere, and you can trust that he's not going to let you down. And I actually think that's really positive for a team like EG, with a player like Svenskeren that really likes to create noise early in other lanes, and especially if you go ahead and add a really aggressive mid laner, I could definitely see that pickup being good for them. The mid laner, this is a position that is completely up in flux for me. Right now, I have them penciled in with Nemesis, because reportedly Fnatic is moving on from Nemesis, and the player that they're looking apparently to replace him with is actually Niski, Cloud9's former mid laner. I would actually have Niski as a target here for EG if he doesn't end up on Fnatic, and Nemesis does end up on Fnatic or whatever, right? I think Nemesis, Niski, anyone of that kind of similar vein could end up here on EG. But Nemesis is a good player. I think he's a little overhyped just because of his time on Fnatic. I think being on Fnatic obviously lends you to being an incredibly hyped up player when you're on one of the two premier organizations in Europe. But I don't think he's bad by any means. I think he's going to be very similar to a player like Niski, or maybe, kind of in that same vein, maybe a slightly better Demonte, that kind of style. He played a lot for his jungler self-made this past year. Self-made obviously is Svenskeren, I should say, is obviously no self-made, but I believe Svenskeren does have that kind of similar style, and so I could see that working here. My worry here is if your lane carries are Impact, Nemesis, and Johnson, I have a hard time trying to see which lane you actively want to play through. I guess it would probably be Johnson in the bottom lane, or I guess you could probably play through Nemesis in mid, but it would just kind of be interesting to see how that planned out. The 7th team is 100 Thieves here. Now, this is probably my favorite team to talk about in the offseason here. They definitely have the most interesting things going on. They are reportedly big buyers this offseason and are looking to buy out pretty much all of the Golden Guardians roster from this year that finished 5th, that almost took down TSM in playoffs, who would end up going on to win the summer split. So the roster is reportedly looking like someday Closer in the jungle, Palafox in the mid lane, FBI and Huhi coming in as the Golden Guardians bot lane, which obviously, if this were to work out, I believe this team has to have Worlds expectations. This is a team that I couldn't see finishing any worse than 3rd or 4th in the league with just this much talent. Someday is someone I've talked about forever as a player who absolutely deserves more than where he is at right now. He is arguably the best mechanical player in the entire region. He can play tanks, he can play carries, he can do whatever, but he's kind of been stuck in elo hell on this 100 Thieves team for the past couple years. Bringing in a player like Closer to help him out is actually incredibly interesting. Closer is probably the most aggressive jungler that we have here in North America. He had an awesome split on Golden Guardians. I would argue you could argue that he is the best jungler in the region. I'm not sure if I'll make that argument, but you could definitely make the argument there. It would be really interesting to see how that would fit with Someday. But talking about that, we have to talk about FBI and Huhi as well. The big standouts from the playoffs in LCS this past year. Double Lift, obviously, with the rare compliments, really raising their stock a ton here. But FBI and Huhi coming over to 100 Thieves here would be incredibly interesting. And let me, again, I know we're halfway through the video, or way more than halfway, but let me reiterate that nothing here is official yet. We are not in free agency. When I say FBI and Huhi coming over here, that doesn't mean that they are 100% coming to 100 Thieves. It's just, that is where they're reportedly rumored being shopped to, and it's worth talking about those rumors, I believe. So FBI and Huhi, I think you could argue, is one of the top 2 bot lanes in the entire region, along with Sven and Vulcan. I think they are just well, I guess Tactical and Core JJ have to be in there as well, but they're not really a lane. Core JJ is more of just a roamer. But FBI and Huhi showed an incredible amount of lane dominance in 2020. They were notoriously ahead in pretty much every matchup that they played. Their laning phase was pretty much unparalleled. FBI is completely fearless, and I would actually really like him on this 100 Thieves squad. The big fun one I want to talk about here is Palafox in the mid lane. I Will Dominate actually leaked this today on stream. I'm not sure if it's a leak or if he's just assuming something's going to happen, but he said it's very likely that Palafox joins this 100 Thieves team as their mid laner. Of course, they need an endemic mid with both Someday and Closer as their imports. Of course, Someday working on the green card. I don't know the situation with that, obviously, with the presidency changing and everything. I know it's a lot harder to get government matters like that done right now. So I don't know if we can expect him to be considered a resident before the start of the 2021 season. I'm going to assume that he's not, and I believe 100 Thieves is as well, because it looks like they're bringing in Palafox here. Palafox was the big playoff star of the Academy season this past year. He dominated on Cloud9 Academy's trip to the championship. Cloud9 Academy obviously had a ton of talent around him with Fudge and Inori and then King, or I guess Tomo at the time, because King wasn't playing in summer. But Palafox did show incredible amounts of promise. He's a guy who's kind of been in the pipeline for quite a long time. I believe he was on Golden Guardians Academy. And I believe he was part of the Golden Glue trade to them at the beginning of 2020. And that's how he kind of ended up on Cloud9 Academy. But either way, this is a guy that has been highly touted. He earned the nickname Palafaker while he was playing in Academy. And if they can get half of what he performed at his Academy, as an Academy mid laner for Cloud9, I think this is actually going to be an incredibly dangerous team, a team that we could definitely be looking at as one of the top 2-3 teams in the entire region. Dignitas is going to be our 8th team here. Dig, I don't blame you if you're looking at your screen right now and going, huh? What the hell am I looking at? Because that is what I said when I kind of heard that this is what the Dignitas roster is going to be looking like. Let's get the elephant out of the room right now. The rumor is that Sneaky is reportedly coming out of retirement to play for this team. Now, I have a really, really hard time believing that that's true. If not just because, what? Sneaky makes so much money as a streamer, and I just find it incredibly difficult to believe that he'd come out of retirement, especially for a kind of bottom-of-the-barrel team like Dignitas. Obviously, Dignitas as an organization isn't, awful, but I just don't see a world in which the roster they're able to put around him is really that special. And that's kind of what we've seen here from the other rumored players on this team. Hanser in the top lane, of course, coming off of the Golden Guardian split. Dardoch in the jungle, returning here. Fun fact about Dardoch, this will actually be the first time in his entire career. I think he's been playing for 4 or 5 years now. This will be the first time in his entire career that he's actually stayed on one team from one split or from 1 year to the next. So congratulations to Dardoch. He's finally done it here on Dignitas. Demonte in the mid lane, and then Aframu, of course, staying on at support here. This is, I don't want to call it the old folks' home, but this is a very, very old team. This is a very, I guess, veteran team, I guess is the word I should probably use. A lot of them, of course, do have very, very vocal fan bases, however, though. Demonte is, really, really started to explode on the internet with his stream popularity and his YouTube. Sneaky, of course, the most popular streamer on Twitch. Afro has a really big fan base. Dardoch has a very, very vocal fan base. And then Hanser is a very well-known name. So you're essentially looking at this team that is essentially like, wow, if this was 2017, they'd be really good. But this is kind of what Dig is looking at. The ones I'm pretty confident are actually happening are Dardoch, Demonte, and Aframu. I have reason to believe that those 3 are almost certainly going to be playing on Dignitas next year. Also, fun thing to note, Demonte can't get rid of, Dignitas, can he? He's going to continue to be on this team for the rest of his life. He's going to leave and come back so many times. But it is what it is. And then, of course, why would you replace Aframu? He's coming off of a very good split where I personally had him voted as 3rd team all LCS. He didn't win it, but I personally voted for him. I see Sneaky and Hanser as probably the most likely options here. Hanser was being bid over by both CLG and Dig, but with CLG actually vocally announcing other roster moves, I think this is definitely the most likely destination for Hanser. But speaking of CLG, we can move into them now. CLG actually is the easiest to talk about because they actually had their entire lineup leaked yesterday, which is very, very nice. Dom linked it. Jacob Wolf came out with the first report, and then it was compounded on top of that on a Travis Gafford video. So I'm pretty confident that this is going to be the lineup for CLG coming in next year. It's going to be Finn in the top lane, Broxa in the jungle, Pobelter mid, definitely at AD carry, and then Smoothie at support. So Pobelter and Smoothie sticking over from the CLG of last year, and then a new top jungle and AD carry. We'll talk about the AD carry first, because I think it's one of the more interesting ones. You're going from 6A to Deathly. I don't see this as a massive change. I think this is mostly being done just to change. Deathly, I imagine, is going to have, maybe not a big buyout or anything like that, but he is going to have to be bought out from EG Academy. And so I'm not necessarily too sure why they'd be making a decision like this. I feel like if you're going to spend the money to go ahead and buy somebody out from Academy, you want to aim for the top. You want to aim for someone like King. You want to aim for someone like Lost. Definitely just seemed like a really odd choice to me. Not that he's a bad player. I just don't see him as that much of an upgrade to Stixay, who is, of course, who he's replacing. Broxa in the jungle is incredibly interesting. Poor Broxa has had his stock plummet just from being on such a high-profile team. I don't think that he played that bad this past year. I think he got a lot of shit when he didn't necessarily deserve it. I don't know if I necessarily love the fit here on CLG. One of the problems that I'll talk about here is I just don't know where they play through, but it is worth noting that it looks like Broxa is going to be heading to CLG and staying in North America. So if you're a North American fan of Broxa, it does look like he is going to be staying within the region. And then the one that shocked everybody, the one that sparked this entire chain reaction of CLG news is Finn in the top lane. Finn, of course, the former top laner for Rogue, who did play at the World Championship this year. Rogue did look to replace him very early in the offseason with Alfari. When that didn't work, I believe they actually went out and got Odo Omne. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I can check really quick. I have it literally right here. Yeah, it looks like they went out and got Odo Omne as their replacement for him, which I would consider an upgrade. Finn, notoriously, kind of in that impact style mold, a tank player. For those of you who aren't as familiar with him in North America, a weak side tank player, hasn't really ever had to carry. He had players like Larson and Han Sama on his team this past year that really did a lot of that carrying role for him. But it just raises the question, if your three lanes are Finn, Pobelter, and Deathly, I don't feel super comfortable in any of those lanes really being something to carry through, and especially with a player like Broxa who thrives off of enabling his teammates. I don't know how this team's going to work out. Finn, of course, also requires a buyout. This was an incredibly strange move for me. I wasn't really too sure why you would spend the money on Finn and not just go grab a young NA talent, but, you know, it is what it is with CLG. That brings us to our final team here, which is going to be Immortals. Now, Immortals is actually kind of interesting as well. We luckily know, or believe we know, 4 of the 5 starting members of their roster. Jungle through support, which is going to be Xerxes, Insanity, Raze, and Isles. Now, Raze and Isles I'm incredibly interested in. I knew that these two would get, or I knew Raze at least would get a starting spot somewhere in LCS, of course. These are the 2 bot laners from the Legacy team that just got sent to the World Championships from Oceania and actually did really well, almost made it out of play-ins in that Team Liquid group. But we knew Raze would get some sort of starting spot here in LCS. He was just too good, and him being considered a resident, it seemed like a no-brainer. He was a free agent. I don't think he's going to cost much money. I think Immortals is going to be really happy that they were able to pull him in here. Bringing Isles in as well is probably a big comfort, a big sigh of relief thing for Raze as well. His bot lane partner from Legacy. I'm not too sure why you would make this move if you're Immortals when you already have someone like Hakuho on the roster, who I just see as a better version of Isles. Isles is, of course, much younger, much more room to improve, but I'm not sure I consider Isles one of those guys that I would expect to turn into some superstar at the support position. Hakuho, I think, has been perennially underrated for quite a long time. He's kind of been stuck on some of these more bottom teams in the LCS, and I think it's really damaged some of his personal reputation. But it can be pretty hard to look good on those teams as a support. I still value Hakuho really highly. I think he does a lot of the things in game really well. But if it is going to be Raze and Isles, I can see that also being a decent bot lane for this team. Xerxes is confirmed to be the jungler, or at least I think as confirmed as it can be before not being confirmed by Jacob Wolf. But of course, Gyoto coming in to be the new head coach of Immortals. Of course, the former head coach of Origin over in the LEC, bringing in his Origin jungler here in Xerxes. Xerxes was considered one of the top 3 junglers in Europe, all kind of going into 2020. Unfortunately, 2020 was a disaster for pretty much everyone on that Origin roster, just in general. And, you know, it's hard to attribute all of that to one player or one coach or whatever. I think everything went wrong for them. But Xerxes coming over here to Immortals is looking to bounce back. He's really not that old. I believe he just turns 21. He either turned 21 like recently or he turns 21 in like a week or so. But, you know, not that old right now. I believe still has a lot to give. And, of course, jungle coach synergy is something that doesn't get talked about a lot, but it's probably the most important synergy that the coach can have with a player is with the jungler to plan out pathing and to plan, you know, things like that. So I could see why wanting to bring in a comfort player like Xerxes here is important. It looks like they're keeping Insanity in the mid lane, which I 100% agree with. He actually looked pretty good to me towards the back half of that summer split. Immortals wasn't very good, but Insanity did look kind of interesting on those weird picks like Karthus. I really enjoyed the Karthus pick, but Insanity, it makes a lot of sense to stay here. He's kind of that young, up-and-coming, we know we're not going to win right now, but we think we have something in this guy. Why not stick with it? So I definitely agree with the decision to keep him there. And then top lane hasn't really been announced yet. They do have another import slot. They could look to import pretty much anywhere. I'm not it looks like they're probably going to save money on the bot lane here, bringing in both Raze and Isles, and so I could see them having a ton of money to go out and spend on an import top laner. For me, I would be much more looking to sign someone like Fate God. I have Fate God on the screen here. I believe Fate God is going to be incredibly highly contested here. Teams like Immortals, teams like Golden Guardians, teams like FlyQuest, Dignitas. I see teams like that kind of all competing to get Fate God. I think this would be a pretty decent landing spot for him. He's been really, really, really good in Academy for 100 Thieves. He's kind of been stuck behind Someday. He did get a little bit of a chance to play in summer of 2019 where he played pretty all right when Ryu had to come in and Someday had to go back down to Academy because of import restrictions. But Fate God, I think he definitely deserves a starting spot somewhere in the LCS. I think he's just too good of an endemic North American top laner for him to not find some sort of starting spot here. I could see this position also being Huni. Huni, of course, has a lot of history with this Immortals organization, this being the first organization that he played for in NA and the one that let him, that released him from his contract so that he was able to go to SKT and go to a Worlds final there just by being good guys, no buyout or anything like that, just to thank him for all his time there. So I could definitely see Huni potentially being an answer here in the top lane, but I think Fate God would be a lot more exciting for me personally. But that's going to be it. That's all 10 teams. I'm not going to go over any sort of power rankings here. I was originally going to do that, but I think I'm going to save a lot of that information or a lot of that thought process for my preseason content. But if you guys liked this, if you guys liked me kind of going over a lot of the changes, a lot of the ideas, go ahead and comment and like this video. It kind of gives me a good idea of what you guys are looking for, what kind of production you guys like to see on this channel, and if you guys are interested. If you want to see more content about LCS in the future, I'm planning on making maybe some LEC, some LCK, LPL, stuff like that, Academy, content like that in the future as well. If you're interested in that, go ahead and hit subscribe. I'm definitely going to be looking to make a lot more content of that variety in the future. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you all later.